Coming up today, the leaders of Korea and Japan exchange messages in celebration of the two nations' 50-year anniversary of normalizing diplomatic ties. President Park Geun-hye says it's time to look to the future while reflecting on the past. The Korean government vows to do all it can to boost the economy stricken by the MERS outbreak, as officials say the nation is winning the battle against the virus. Plus, eurozone finance ministers say they are confident a bailout deal can be reached with Greece to save it from crashing out of the single currency and possibly the EU. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, June 23rd here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, Korea and Japan marked the 50th anniversary of their diplomatic ties on Monday. The leaders of both countries attended ceremonies hosted by each other's embassies, displaying their commitment to improving ties strained over historical and territorial differences. Choi Yu-sun starts us off.
At a reception hosted by the Japanese embassy in Seoul, President Park Geun-hye said this year will offer a historical opportunity for the two countries to take their relationship forward.
과거사의 무거운 짐을 화해와 상생의 마음으로 내려놓을 수 있도록 만들어 나가는 것이 중요합니다. 양국이 그런 시작을 할 때 국교 정상화 50주년인 올해는 한일 양국이 새로운 미래를 함께 열어나가는 원년이 될 것입니다.
The leaders of the two countries haven't met for summit talks as relations have soured over historical differences from Japan's colonization of the Korean peninsula. One of the most contentious issues is the Japanese military's coercion of Korean women into wartime sex slavery. President Park said it's the duty of both sides to resolve such issues while cooperating in economic and non-political areas. At an event hosted by the Korean embassy in Tokyo, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe vowed to work with President Park to rebuild their strained ties as their cooperation with Washington is vital to peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific.
Let's reflect on the past 50 years and the progress we have made so we can move forward in building a new generation together.
While speculation rises over a leaders' summit becoming reality, President Park's message to Prime Minister Abe's envoy earlier in the day reflects her position that it's Tokyo that will need to make sincere efforts to resolve the historical issues. President Park said she hopes the Prime Minister will carry on his predecessor's statements of remorse about Japan's imperialistic past. Abe is due to clarify his position when Japan marks the 70th anniversary of its defeat in World War II later this year. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now, Monday, of course, was a very significant anniversary for Korea and Japan. So we're going to trace back the steps of how normalization of diplomatic relations affected both countries. Our Hwang Sang-hee highlights the key moments of the past 50 years and shows us where the two nations currently stand.
On June 22, 1965, Korea and Japan agreed to begin a new chapter in their relations, leaving behind decades of unfortunate history. The normalization of their diplomatic relations, a result of 14 years of lengthy negotiations, secured economic aid for Korea and post-war settlement for Japan.
The Korea-Japan Treaty officially came into effect at 5 p.m. on June 22nd, leaving behind the unfortunate Korea-Japan relations of the past and paving the way for a great new history.
With the financial help of Japan, Korea rose from the ashes of war and underwent major growth. Half a century later, the two neighbors are the closest of economic partners, with bilateral trade volume jumping nearly 400-fold. But unresolved issues remain. In their treaty, Seoul and Tokyo failed to address Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of hundreds of thousands of Korean women. The issue came to light in 1991 with the testimony of one of the victims and is now the biggest point of contention between the two neighbors. Seoul is demanding a sincere apology and compensation from the Japanese government, while Tokyo claims that the issue was resolved by a 1995 landmark apology issued by then Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama. There are a number of other thorny issues, such as Japan's territorial claim over Korea's Dokdo Island and Tokyo's bid to list several wartime industrial facilities as UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. Whether or not the 50th anniversary of the normalization of relations can be a turning point for the two neighbors remains to be seen. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's Foreign Minister Byungse says any resolution to resolve the wartime sex slavery issue should be primarily based on what the victims want. Speaking in an interview with Japanese public broadcaster NHK on Monday, Yoon said that if they come up with a solution the women are happy with, the issue will be dealt with and the victims will have closure. He stressed the importance of restoring dignity to the 50 registered Korean survivors before they pass away. Minister Yoon said that by doing so, the two countries can open a new chapter in their relations. Assessing the meeting with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida during his visit to Tokyo earlier this week, Yoon said the two sides were able to reach agreement on some pending issues. Japan is considering specifying the historical background of its wartime industrial facilities it is pushing to have registered on UNESCO's World Heritage List. Now, citing a number of sources, Tokyo-based Kyodo News reported on Monday that the Shinzo Abe administration is working on details to create an information brochure for visitors. It would include the history of some of the sites where tens of thousands of Koreans were forced to work as slave laborers during the colonial era. The report said the move reflects the Japanese government's decision to adhere to an agreement reached during a meeting between the foreign ministers of Korea and Japan this week. Now, Tokyo will soon inform the World Heritage Committee on the latest compromise with Korea in order to push ahead with its previous bid to put 23 Meiji industrial sites on the UNESCO list. The head of the Eurogroup of finance ministers says a resolution to the Greek debt crisis could be reached later this week. Wrapping up talks in Brussels on Monday, Eurogroup President Jeroen Dijsselbloem said proposals from Athens had arrived too late for a quick agreement to be struck during an emergency summit of EU leaders on Monday evening local time, happening right now, in fact, but that finance chiefs would now pore over the plans in the hope of reaching a deal in the next few days. Now, there is optimism, with one EU official describing Greece's proposals as the first detailed and credible plan they've seen in months. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras is believed to have agreed to raise taxes on the rich and some raising of VAT, but is refusing to budge on pensions. Now, Tsipras is due to meet German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President François Hollande and other eurozone leaders within the next couple of hours to discuss the latest plan. Turning now to the latest on the MERS outbreak in Korea, and after over a month of dealing with the virus, the country seems to be getting back on track, with schools and businesses normalizing operations and public fear subsiding substantially. The death toll has been ticking up in recent days, though, but so has the number of patients who have fully recovered from MERS. That figure now stands at 50, the recovered total, and is expected to rise in the coming days. Korea did report 2 additional deaths from MERS on Monday and 3 new confirmed cases. That brings the total number of infections now to 172. On a related note, the presidential office says it will convene a meeting on Wednesday with Korean medical experts and 5 international experts from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization. They'll work together to seek better ways to counter the MERS outbreak and other types of contagious diseases. Now, the economic impact of the MERS outbreak was the central topic of the second day of interpellation sessions at the National Assembly on Monday. Discussions were focused on whether the economy needed some extra stimulus to cope with the situation. Park Geun-hye reports.
Lawmakers' main concerns on Monday's interpellation session were about the government's plans to stimulate the economy amid the MERS outbreak. 9 top government officials, including the Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and Trade Minister, attended the assembly session focusing on the economy.
Will the Finance Minister secure a supplementary budget to assist those affected by the MERS outbreak?
Even if the outbreak is contained during the early stages, it's already greatly impacted the economy. Thus, we will examine an optimum level for stimulus plans, including the supplementary budget.
Although rival parties all agree on the need for the supplementary budget, they stress that ways to secure the budget as well as its effectiveness should be clarified. Regarding follow-up questions about the government's possible budget deficits this year, the finance minister said the government will suffer deficits to some degree, but that the situation has improved compared to last year. Last year, the government recorded a deficit of nearly $10 billion in tax revenue. The government's measures for supporting the economy's most vulnerable income bracket was another focal point of the session.
What are the incumbent administration's measures to assist the low-income bracket?
The government considers providing jobs for people to be the most important measure to lessen the burden of the low-income bracket. We also aim to pursue increasing household income, reducing living expenses, and providing direct assistance to the most vulnerable classes, such as small business owners and farmers.
Lawmakers also questioned the officials about the government's commitment to counter the nation's economic challenges, such as ballooning household debt and measures to help farmers cope with drought damages. The 4-day interpellation sessions will continue through Wednesday. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
And it's not only the government that's busy trying to shake off the negative economic impact of the MERS outbreak. Business circles are also being proactive to ensure the country remains firmly on the recovery path. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Korean business circles stepped up efforts to shrug off the blow dealt by the MERS outbreak on the country's path to recovery. At an emergency meeting led by the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Chairman Park Geun-hye on Monday stressed the importance of carrying out economic revitalization plans to foster investment and employment. Park says the country's service sector, including the tourism industry, have been the hardest hit from the outbreak as people have refrained from engaging in outdoor activities. The number of foreign tourists visiting the country is expected to drop by 82% during July and August from the same period last year to around 202,500 people, incurring losses of around $98.7 million. In response, the group called for cooperation between government and business circles to bolster consumer sentiment. The group also requested for the normalization of dealings with some 130 foreign chambers of commerce and industries planning to visit the country. This comes as foreign buyers, in particular those from China and the Middle East, have asked to delay investment deals since the MERS outbreak. Park asked the government to carry out its economic revitalization policies according to plan, including its pledge to support small businesses and execution of fiscal expansionary measures. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Foreign investors have been net buyers on the Korean stock market so far this year. However, that trend hasn't applied so far this month due to lingering uncertainties at home and abroad. Kim Min-ji reports.
Foreign investors have snapped up a net $8.3 billion worth of stocks in Korea's main bourse so far this year. According to market operator Korea Exchange, the stocks they sought out most were those in the chemical sector, which were picked up at a net $1.6 billion, followed by shares in the IT sector and transportation industries. However, for June alone, foreign investors became net sellers of Korean stocks, offloading about $300 million. Overall, offshore ownership of Korean stocks fell nearly 1 percentage point to account for 33% of the local market.
Strong share prices have induced foreigners to sell their stakes on the main bourse. They are also turning to futures as the current share prices may be overrated. Besides that, unfavorable conditions in Greece was also a negative factor among investors.
He added that the MERS outbreak in Korea has also raised uncertainties among offshore investors. Experts do expect a turnaround once the outbreak gets under control and if the Greek debt situation gets resolved. But with the U.S. Federal Reserve on track to raise interest rates later this year, it's likely that foreigners will remain net sellers for the time being. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, 3 sets of Korea's oldest medical book series titled Tong-ui Bogam have officially become national treasures. The Cultural Heritage Administration said the series, which literally means Mirror of Eastern Medicine, was first compiled by a royal physician named Hojun during the Joseon dynasty. The 3 sets, promoted as national treasures, were part of the encyclopedia's first prints from the 17th century. The entire 25-volume series of Tong-ui Bogam was listed on UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in 2009. Well, that's all we have for now. Have a great day, and thank you for watching, and we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.